And before we start, just give me a little bit of feedback regarding how audible I am. Can you hear me well? Can you see my presentation? And should I adjust my mic position a little bit or no? So feel free to express your opinion in chat. It's good. Good. Thank you. Thank you as well. So anyway, feel free to let me know in case something goes wrong, just in case. All right, great. So we've got 20 folks so far who is going to learn some Flutter today, which is great. I think we will see more people coming. But anyway, couple of more questions before we get started. Guys, have you completed all of the required prerequisites for this workshop in order to be able to work with practical tasks? I'm talking about installing Flutter and Dart, setting up your editor, as well as running your simple app. So just put plus sign as your sign of agreement, sort of, just like this. Anyway, if no, it is pretty comfortable time to do this right now, because now we're going to walk through some introductory stuff. And that's why I will simply put these links into chat. So you can basically use my voice as your background noise while doing this. So I think you still have a chance to complete all of the steps and be ready for upcoming practical tasks, I suppose. Yep, and I think the last particular point I want to make is that the chances are that I won't be able, unfortunately, to answer all of your questions during our Q&A sessions. That is the reason I highly encourage you to join our Telegram channel and to post your questions here as well, just to let me address them offline between our series, between our workshops. So please don't be frustrated, don't be offended. I will try to address all of your concerns as possible. All right, cool. I think this is basically it with all of the initial checks I wanted to perform. And I think we are ready basically to start. Again, greetings everyone. My name is Alexander Brenchev, and I want to give you a warm welcome on our workshop series devoted fully to one particular technology, which is called Flutter. And honestly speaking, I am pretty excited to finally kick this event off, because we put a lot of efforts into bringing this event to life, gathering all of the required informations, preparing tasks and things like that. And let me kindly introduce myself. My name is Alexander Brenchev, and I am working as a senior UI developer at Grid Dynamics. And you have probably already read something about me from this workshop landing we've built. But honestly speaking, I am not that really a superhero. The thing I can say about myself is that I've just been working as a front-end developer for almost 6 years already. Most of the time I've been building single-page applications with modern UI frameworks such as React or Angular. And in my free time, I love making some sort of significant contributions to various open source projects, as well as teaching people to write their front ends using just vanilla JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and other related web fundamentals. And before we start diving into the Flutter itself, I would like to sort of actualize this topic to you, because it is not a secret that each time we get introduced to some new technology, new approach or tool, we usually express some sort of resistance towards it, because in each occasion of this, we should get some solid justification for actually learning this technology, putting this approach into use. And that is the reason why I want to start our workshop with one particular question. Like, why should I even bother about Flutter? And here I want to describe my own motivation behind this, my own justification in the form of some short illustrations. So this is literally me, just a regular front-end developer who is busy doing some front-end stuff daily. And I've already harnessed one particular stack which allows me to build UIs. And this stack is basically a web stack, which actually it's not only JavaScript, it's not fair to call it just JS. It actually includes various things such as HTML, CSS. So don't be confused about it. I name it this way just for convenience. And this particular stack allows me already to build a UI for one particular platform, which is called web, which is basically web UI. And it is said that there is another technology that has been emerged just recently, and this technology is called Flutter. And the key thing is that Flutter allows us also to build a UI, but for a different platform, which is mobile UI, such as iOS or Android devices. Another point here is that it is known that there are some certain similarities between both stacks that I already know, which is kind of JavaScript and the web, and Flutter, which basically leads me to a conclusion that I should not put so many efforts into learning Flutter. But anyway, what other reason can be to learn some other technology apart from just expanding your own professional expertise? The thing is that actually building some UI brings us profit, just as the developers and the professionals. Taking this into account, we can just come to a simple conclusion that learning Flutter will simply allow us to kind of increase our profit, let's say that, by putting not so many efforts, just because we are going to learn some technology or tool set which is kind of similar to the tools that we already know. However, I should say that my interest in Flutter is not purely commercial. It is just not fair to say anything like this. We can't deny that actually an interest to Flutter has grown in some steady positive rate across the years. And besides all of that, Flutter already features some significant list of testimonials and use cases written by big companies like this, which actually just adds up an additional argument, at least for me, to learn this technology, or at least to express some interest in it and at least get some insight in order to be able to consider its possible usage. And so I think it is the right time actually to answer yet another important question: what Flutter actually is. And let's refer to Wikipedia for this. So this is basically the Flutter, and there are only 4 points that I would like you to focus on. So at its core, by its nature, Flutter is an application framework. So basically, it is some set of abstractions which allows us to build some applications. As you can see here, these applications can be executed on various platforms, such as Android, iOS, and even desktop ones. And apart from that, you can see that it is written in C, C++, and Dart. And I swear to God, we are not going to explore this C or C++ part today, but Dart is definitely a thing that we are going to be interested in. And as a final thing to take a look at is that Flutter is baked by Google, just kind of for your information. And now I want to introduce you to our plan for this workshop and for the way how we're going to work today. So basically, the plan is pretty simple. We are going to cover 4 different sections over today's workshop. And each particular section will be devoted to one common UI development problem that we usually face during performing our daily duties. Each section will include all of the theory required for it, as well as some practical task where you will have a chance to put all of your fresh, newly acquired skills into test. And for now, I estimate each task to last up to 15 minutes. However, we will put some careful attention to that. After your take to some particular problem, there will be a solution demo performed by me. So like an example of how I decided to tackle the same problem. And then we are going to conduct a little bit Q&A session together in order to discuss the topic that we've passed, as well as some issues or some good things about our solutions. Another thing that I would like you to do in order to get started is to clone this particular GitHub repo, since this will serve as a base for all of our practical tasks. Let me just put the link into chat. And on top of that, I will share with you the presentation itself, just to make it available for you. So you will be able to use all of the code and things like that. Let me just put this link into chat. Okay, never mind. I will share it later. All right, so let's keep going. Up to that point, do you have any questions regarding how we are going to work today? Any kind of feedback or things like that? So now I will carefully look into chat in order to gather something. If everything is all right, please feel free to... Sorry, Sergey, which particular link? Yeah, sure. Here it goes. All right, I think we are... Okay, guys, can you see? Oh, wow. Cool, cool. Olga, can we do something with this so nobody see any links? Okay, guys, let us just figure something out. In Telegram, yes, I think I can. Right. Okay, Olga is to the rescue. Oh, sorry, that was my bad, I guess. Sorry. So we've got a GitHub. What else, guys, do you need? Let me just post everything. So we've got a GitHub link, we've got the prerequisites. Let's just post another time our Telegram channel. Can you guys see links posted by me? I hope so. Cool. Thank you. Sorry about that. Yes, all right. Let's finally move on to our Flutter journey. And so, basically, now we are ready to move on to actual set of these common problems that I mentioned before, which we are going to cover today. And basically, the first problem is how to build the components in Flutter, since most of the existing modern frameworks are actually built on this idea of building a composable UI made out of reusable and isolated components. We will have to find out how the same paradigm is implemented in Flutter. Afterwards, we'll have to explore how to cope with layout and styling in Flutter in order to make our components fancier and make them look make them accept the same appearance we want them to. Then we are going to introduce some more complicated application structure, and we will basically separate our application into multiple screens. And therefore, we will have to find out how to organize routing between multiple screens of our application. And the final topic for today's will be actually the state management. We will face the need to set up the usage of some state which will be available application-wide for all of the components. However, it is undoubtable that learning some concepts just in a vacuum is not that actually funny. And that is the reason why I've decided to make a whole application that we are going to build today together with you in order to learn all of these concepts regarding Flutter. And here it is, an application called Active Vocabulary. And before we get started, let me kind of introduce to the small domain area we are going to work with today. And basically, there are two types of vocabulary each. So firstly, I should say that both of these terms are used in language learning theory. And so actually every language learner has two sets of vocabulary. The first one is called passive, which actually encompasses all of the words that you know, but you are not able to use that fluently yet. So you know their meaning, but you can't really use them that often in your daily speech. Opposite to that, there is an active vocabulary, which actually consists of words that you know and you are able to use freely. And a typical objective for every language learner is to expand its active vocabulary as fast as possible, just to make your speech sound more natural, more sophisticated, and so on and so forth. And from this point, let me try to demonstrate you some mockups of our future application, or at least of its first version. So for now, this is going to be a simple completely manual word usage tracker, which will simply consist of one screen, which you can see just on the slide. As you can see here, we can identify here a particular set of features, such as an ability to add new word to my dictionary, just to the list of words that I would like to practice using. I should be able to browse the list of my words that I'm currently trying to practice, as well as I should be able to track usage of these words. And this is basically it with the functional requirements for our first milestone of our application. And I don't know, guys, about you, but the first question that came to my mind when I was facing that problem was actually the question about how can I even write my components in Flutter? How should I do that? That is basically the reason why we are jumping next to our first chapter of our today's Flutter's journey, which is all about components, also known as widgets in Flutter world. And now let's take a look at the simple example of widget, as you can see on your slide. So there are key points that we need to identify in this widget. First of all, we should identify that widget is just a Dart class and nothing special, as you can see here. But this class extends some of the built-in class from Flutter, which is either stateless widget or stateful widget. For now, just for the sake of simplicity, we are sticking to stateless widget. However, later we are going to explore other kind of widgets as well. And this widget should implement one particular method, which is called build. And as you can see here, this method actually is responsible for the way how this widget is going to be rendered in form of, in the sense of which kind of widget tree it will return actually. And as you can see here, it will return a simple tree which consists only of one particular widget, which is called text. And as you can guess, text widget is simply responsible for displaying some text. The final part which we should take into account is that build method is obliged to accept one particular argument called context, which is actually the thing like build context. This topic is sort of a pretty advanced in Flutter, and we don't really need to go that deep into it. But just for you to understand, I would like to describe this idea in a nutshell. And so basically, build context of every widget is an information about this widget disposition within the widget tree, which basically means that some widget can theoretically, by usage of this context, can somehow interact with any of its parents. This regards how deep it lies within the tree. And so basically it can access it from anywhere as long as they belong to the same tree. And we are going to see a couple of examples of where such level of interaction might come in handy. But for now, just keep a simple idea that context keeps an information about widget disposition within the tree. And as I mentioned before, there are actually two major kinds of widgets in Flutter, which is basically stateless widget, which we have already seen, as well as stateful widget, which is still required for us to cover. And so let's jump into it quickly. So basically, definition of stateful widget is kind of more challenging, more contrived, and it usually consists of two distinct parts. As you can see here, first of all, we need to define a so-called state for our widget, which, as you can see here, as usage tracker state, as some potential state for our work usage tracker. And as you can see here, the only difference we can see here is that our state object extends not a widget, but some new class called state, which is actually responsible for representing some state in Flutter. However, it might be confusing, but we can see that it actually implements some sort of interface of widget, because now build method lives here instead of widget. And actually, build method inside state works in the same way as in stateless widget, and it is responsible for exactly the same thing, just to build a corresponding widget tree. And it has the same obligations in the form of accepting build context as an argument. And then, as a final point, we should wire our state to our actual widget, which should be defined as stateful widget by extending the corresponding class. And this wiring is happening via implementation of built-in create state method, which, as you can guess, is responsible for creating this state object. And basically, this is it with the definition of stateful widget. However, we still don't know the exact reason why did we go into all of this hassle defining such complicated structure. And here goes the answer. The thing is that compared to status widget, stateful widget is able to maintain its own internal state. What it basically means is that there is an extended API inside state object, and specifically there is a method called setState. And as you can guess, setState is an exact method which is responsible for notifying Flutter about some state changes which have occurred within some particular widget, and therefore Flutter is going to re-render the corresponding widget just in order to synchronize the rendered widgets as well as the latest changes from state. As you can see here, the signature looks like this. It actually accepts a callback where you are able to mutate your state in whatever way you like. And as you can see here, usually state simply consists of just the class fields, instance fields of your state object. And this is basically it with the state mutations. However, apart from that, we usually don't want to mutate our state like simply without any reason. We usually want to wire it up with some user-driven action or event or some side effect or thing like that. And let's take a look at an example of it. So basically, as you can see here, we've defined previously this track usage function, which is going to increase our usage counter. And now let's take a look, how can we connect some user-driven event with this handler? And it is basically as simple as just passing some argument to our constructor function. So as you can see here, our widget tree is a little bit more complicated. It is some sort of column which consists of some text widget, which is responsible for displaying currently recorded usages, as well as a button, which is actually responsible for tracking some new usage. And as you can see here, this elevated button component accepts an argument called onPressed. And this is, you can think about it just as about props in React or inputs and outputs in Angular. So basically, this is just an argument we can provide, and this elevated button is going to execute our callback, and therefore, this way we will be able to react to user events just by mutating state and doing things that we need. And this is not the only difference of using stateful widgets instead of stateless one. Another thing is that, as you might have already noticed, that most of the work is conducted inside not a widget, but inside a state. And the thing is that state object is actually much more complicated, and it features its own life cycle, which is pretty simplified, and you can see it here. This thing, I should say, is also kind of too complicated to dive into right now at this point. However, there are only two things that I would like you to take a note about. And these callbacks are exactly init state and dispose, as you can see on the schema. And so the thing is that in other modern UI frameworks, such as React or Angular, we usually have some API which allows us to facilitate one particular use case, such as subscription to some store during initial render of some component, such as ENG only need callback in Angular or use effect without dependencies in React, for instance. And basically, init state is just an equivalent of these use cases. So basically, if you're writing your Flutter application and you need to subscribe to some storage just on initial render of your widget, this is going to be the right place for you to place this logic inside init state method. At the same time, you usually also need to do some cleanup after your widget has become unmounted, for instance, or removed completely from the tree. And for this case, you can use dispose method, basically in the same way as you can use ng on destroy in Angular, let's say, or cleanup callback in use effect in React, for instance. And this is basically the most important point I would like you to know for now. However, if you don't mind, you are completely free to dive deeper into this topic on your own. And so here is the list of some reference materials regarding this topic of state lifecycle in Flutter. So feel free to consult these links as well. And up to this point, we've discovered, I think, almost all of the required knowledge regarding how can we build components in Flutter. We've even seen some example of some sort of event binding. How can we react to key presses, for instance? But we still don't know how should we implement this first use case where we need to enter some word into text field and submit this form. And now let's take a look at this final piece of the puzzle. And so basically, as in other frameworks, there is a widget which is responsible for text editing capabilities. And this widget is called text field. You can see it in an example right here. And there are several variants how can you use API of text field. However, in my experience and in my humble opinion, I think the most comfortable and convenient one for now is to use it via so-called text editing controller. So basically, text editing controller is some object which is supposed to be responsible for internal state of your text field. And the only thing you need to do, you need to create a new instance of this controller and pass it as an argument to text field. And now that is the good time to actually find out how can we interact with this controller. And the thing is that, for instance, we can access its current value by accessing property called text just to get its actual text value. Or we can, for instance, clear its content by calling a corresponding method. Moreover, I could say that it is possible to set up some sort of a reactive event listeners to word controller, but this API is sort of advanced, so I hope we will cover it later, but it is not necessary to do it for now. There are two crucial points that you need to take into account while working with text editing controller. The first thing is that in most of the cases, you would like to use your editing controller inside specifically state and therefore stateful widget, not about stateless, because usually I guess you would want this controller to remain during the re-renders of one particular component. Since we are using a state here, we should also take care about disposal of our resources. And in this example, as you can see here, we are calling the corresponding method of this controller just to facilitate the cleanup of the resources and avoid any sort of resource or memory leaks. Another hint that I would like to give you for now is that text field, for some reason, I don't know exactly why, should be rendered inside some box whose dimensions should be constrained, at least somehow. And that is basically the reason why I've introduced some weird sized box widget, which is literally a size box, just a box which can be bounded by some dimensions value, such as width or height. Just take this into account when you will be working on our first practical task, which is coming really, really soon, I should say. Yep, and basically at this point, I would like to make some sort of recap of all of the information we read so far. So basically, what have we discovered? At first, we've discovered different kinds of widgets, both stateless and stateful, their primary use cases and their differences in definition and in the way how they work. Besides that, we have already seen how to compose multiple widgets into widget trees. On top of that, we've seen how to handle various user events, such as clicks or input. And that is basically the point where we can finally go to our first practical task that I would like you to tackle for today. And so the first thing you need to do, you need to open up your repo that I asked you previously to clone and check out the branch called task-01-components. And I will actually do the same with you. And of course, feel free to interrupt me in case of any issues. So guys, have you opened it? Have you managed? Is everything all right? Am I muted? I hope that no. No, I'm not. Okay. Okay, cool. So again, okay, then let me just share my screen just to open up editor together with you. All right, and I hope guys you can see it. Okay, cool. So, all right. So basically, this is the homepage component, which is going to be some sort of a start point for your first practical task. And basically, let me at first kindly remind you what we are going to build during this task. And I suppose you can still see my screen, right? Okay, sorry about this. Okay, guys, can you see my presentation for now? Okay, cool. Sorry for this mess. I'm not that familiar with all of this presentation stuff. I'm so sorry about this. Anyway, just as a reminder, what we are trying to build in our first task, what is actually all about the requirements. So we are going to build a simple word usage tracker, which is responsible for tracking the usage of our words, as you can guess. And it should consist of one simple screen, which is going to encompass all of the required widgets. As I remember, the use cases are the following. We should be able to enter new words to our list of words by using some text field or things like that. Additionally to that, we should be able, obviously, to show the list of words that we want to practice, and we should also display their respective usage tracking as well. Some control, I suppose a button, which is responsible for actually recording or track the usage of this word. And this is actually your objective for the task number 1. So at this point, is it, guys, clear for you what should be done? I'm not asking about how it should be done, but at least about what should be done. Just send a plus to the chat. Cool, cool, nice. Okay, let me do this one more time. Now let's go back to my code. And here is the thing I would like to share with you. So this is basically your entry point. I hope you can see it. And so it contains a short guidance just for you. Not a lot of hand holding, to be honest, but just some guidance for you or some points of inspiration which you can use. So basically, you can tackle this problem by following one of the proposed roads. You can actually place all of your widgets just inside this homepage and be completely happy with that, and it will be fine, I guess. Or at the same time, you can try to decompose your UI into multiple widgets written by your own, and then use them in a conjunction and put inside the homepage, which will be a little bit more beautiful solution, I should say. And if you, in case you struggle or feel in some sort of a little bit off the track or just uncomfortable, feel free to use this link, which actually contains all of the required features documentation in order to accomplish this practical task successfully. And again, as I promised, I will share with you a link to my presentation just to let you access all of the code samples that I've shown to you so far. Well, guys, while I'm doing this, can we conduct a little bit of a vote regarding how do you think, how much time will you need to accomplish this at the current point? 10 or 15 minutes? Just put the required number into chat, please. I will be grateful. 10, 15. 3 days. Nice, understandable, cool. Well, you are the brave ones, I should say. Okay, anyway, let it be 10 minutes, but oh, I had to not to mess with these controls. Okay, here is the proper slide. Okay, guys, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to set up my alarm clock for 10 minutes. And as soon as I do that, I will just say goodbye to you and we'll talk to you guys later. So let me set it up. Okay, so let's go. Time is running, clock's ticking. I am going to mute and see you guys soon. right, so time is up, and so how's it going? How was your progress? Have you managed to do everything that you've planned? No? How do you feel about it? Okay, cool. At least someone is having fun here. Well, yeah, it happens sometimes. Yeah. Sorry about that anyway. I didn't intend this experience to be like that, but anyway, sorry about that. So, cool. I think we're pretty much set. In this case, let me just try to introduce my solution to this problem. And again, I need to reshare my screen, I guess. Cool. I hope you can see it. Okay, cool. Can you see my ID, guys? Cool. Okay, never mind. So basically, my root component is just a stateful widget, since it is going to hold the root state of my application, which is basically an array of words. And as you can see here, I've implemented some sort of custom structure for this, which is basically just a class called word, which consists of only two fields: text, which is basically text of this word, as well as usage count, which is basically the number of usages that have been tracked so far. And the thing is that basically here I've got, let's take a look at this particular widget tree. So I decided to split up my component tree into specifically two components. The first one, which is basically word field, which is responsible for letting user enter new words and therefore populate the list. And actually the word list, which is responsible for displaying words. And as you can see here, they are wired all together via arguments, via callback arguments. And inside these arguments, I just do my state mutation logic, such as creating new word, putting it into list, as well as increasing the usage count of some particular word. And this is basically it. Here you can see some sort of array methods, as you can see here and here. API is more or less similar with JavaScript, but with its own kind of twists. And now let's put just a short glance onto components themselves. So words list is just a simple stateless widget, since it doesn't really need any internal state. It is simply responsible for just spitting out the list of words. And as you can see, it simply works like this. It just takes all of the words which it accepts as an argument and iterates over it in order to generate new widget tree, which is composed from text of word, usage count, as well as button to track the usage. And as you can see here, with this sort of a weird type signature, it accepts a callback as an argument. And that is basically the only thing that I would like to tell here. The only unobvious quirk here is that there are several array manipulation methods, such as map, for instance, which actually returns not a list. It returns some iterative structure. I don't even know how it's called, by the way, which is actually can't be a full substitution for the list. And that is the reason why when you need to use some sort of array iterative construction within your widget tree, you have to implicitly convert it into list by calling the corresponding API, which is in this case toList method. And this is basically it with words list. And the same thing let's do with word field. Word field is also a stateful widget, even though it does not really require some internal state. However, as I mentioned before, if we are going to work with a text editing controller, we have to use stateful widget and therefore state just to maintain the same instance to text editing controller across multiple re-renders. And it works more or less the same as I described on the slides. So basically we've passed controller to the text field, and then we used its text property to access this particular value of text field. And as a sign of successful submission, we clear this field with clear method. And additionally to that, we are not forgetting about the disposal of our resources on dispose callback here, basically. Yep, and this basically allows us to accomplish our use case. And this is basically it with the task number 1. And the only thing that scares me is that it is already 6 p.m. But anyway, never mind. Okay, nevertheless, it is time for your questions. So basically our first Q&A session after our first section. So, and we'll just look into the chat in order to gather all of your questions. So feel free to ask anything that you would like to ask regarding the topic, of course. Does this whole solution make sense? Does the whole thing make sense that we are talking about here? Yeah, this is correct, because now I'm going to talk just simply with the chat. Okay, guys, so looks as if we have no questions for the first part. Are you ready to move on to the next one, or do you want me to hold it on for a moment? Just waiting for your plus signs. Okay, at least I've got one. Cool. Okay, anyway, you will have a chance to provide all of your questions later via Telegram channel. So anyway, let's simply move on. Okay, at this point, we've done a great job. We've actually implemented our new simple Flutter application. However, the thing is that its appearance is not really user-friendly, so to say, because we actually have not yet discovered any potential or possible way of styling our Flutter components. And this is basically the reason why we are going to discover this topic, this problem, as next section. And so basically, here's the question: how should I perform layout and styling in my Flutter application? And the thing is that we don't have any separate styling tool in Flutter at our disposal, unfortunately. But as usual, we have widgets. And basically, this is the answer for this problem as well. So we should use just a special kind of a widget. And let's make a quick rundown across these widgets. So basically, the first and the main widget that you might have encountered already is a container widget, which is basically responsible for laying out some big blocks of the user interface on the screen. And basically, it allows you to control various things regarding dimensions of certain container, which actually is just like a box where you can define its width as well as height. And you can also set its offsets. External one, which are actually margins, and paddings, which are internal ones. On top of that, you can control alignment of its children inside. You can set the child widget as well, because you anyway have to put something into your container. Additionally to that, you can apply several purely decorative effects for it, probably similar to the one that you might encounter just in a plain CSS. For instance, here we have applied some rotation, which is also transformed, as well as some advanced box decoration, which allows us to set things like border radius, as well as background color for this particular box. And let's take actually a look at the result of this code. It actually renders to something like this. So basically we've got a thing that we've coded, which is basically a box with blue color, some sort of a rounded borders, which are also green one, and a little bit rotated to the right. And this is basically it with its capabilities. The thing is that apart from laying out some big layout boxes, we need to lay out its content somehow. And here is another portion of widgets we can use for this approach. The thing is that we can use either row or column widget to lay out our children. The API is almost similar, and I would like you to pay attention to this carefully and take a closer look, because you might find some similarities between this widgets API as well as another method of laying out elements in a web, in a CSS specifically. And this method is basically a flexbox, because at the same time, I mean, it's also shaped and built upon the concept of axis, which basically it has two axes, main one and cross one, that you can control it via other CSS properties such as flex direction, for instance. And here we have the same thing. So we have basically a row and a column where we can control its alignment across both axes, as well as direction of its text children, for instance, via text direction, as well as vertical direction as well. Yep. However, at this point, we might face a question of if we have already got an equivalent of Flexbox in Flutter, can we potentially get somewhere an equivalent of Flex Children in order to have more or less the same API to do stuff like flex grow, flex shrink, or just resize our content of our rows and columns? And the answer is more or less yes, because there is yet another widget which is supposed to be used inside either row or column, which is called expanded. And this widget is pretty minimalistic in terms of API. It consists of only, I hope you can hear me, right? It consists only of a child, which is supposed to be placed inside this expanded widget, and a thing which is called a flex factor, which works basically in the same way as flex grow property in Flexbox. So basically, it allows you to define which portion of free available space this particular widget should occupy, if it has some available space. And as you can guess from this widget definition, this blue box is going to take twice as much space compared to Amber one. And we can prove that by looking into example. And yeah, here how it looks like. And the next thing we need to discover is any opportunity to apply some custom styling for widgets that usually act as some sort of leaves of our widget trees, which are mostly responsible for our content, such as text, for instance. And here we go. Basically, text styling can be done via style property, which is set with text style widget. And as you can see here, maybe something was going wrong. I don't know anyway. And the thing is that, I'm sorry for this. Okay, got it. Yep, and the thing is that textile is responsible for, sorry, do you see my presentation? Oh God, that is bad. Sorry about this. Okay, let me do something with this. Okay, I'm sorry. Can you see it now? Cool, cool. Well, that happens anyway. So, cool. Let's just make then quick rundown of everything that we've covered before. So basically, what I was showing to you. I was showing to you an example of container widget, which is responsible for laying out some big building blocks of our UI. And I've shown you some picture of it. Yeah, looks good. And then I've jumped into new widgets, which allows us to lay out our children widgets as a form of row column. And it looks like this, and it's pretty similar to Flexbox from CSS. Yep, I hope you remember that. And I finished it up with the expanded widget, which acts more or less the same as FlexChild, where you can control which portion of free available space this widget is going to occupy. And here is the picture just as a proof of the thing that it works exactly like this. Cool. And I was about to finish my speech with text styling, and actually it is like just a regular suite of text styling properties. You can control color, you can control font size, family, style, and various decorations, which are also available on the web as well. The only thing you should take into account is the height property, because actually it controls simply line height, even though it says simply height. So just don't be confused with that. Put your attention into this. Okay, cool. And here goes yet another example of how this text styling looks like. And the thing is that this is not actually it with all of the capabilities for styling our widgets in Flutter. The real thing is that Flutter's built-in widgets library already encompasses a great wide variety of different widgets built with keeping in mind both of main native platforms, such as Cupertino, which stands for iOS, and Material Components. So I highly encourage you to visit these links and to take a look at the available widgets for you to use, and maybe even to incorporate these widgets into your project. So here you can find a lot of utilities such as buttons, text fields, floating action buttons, list views, and other platform dependent things. And a little bit messed up, but anyway, I think at this point we are ready to work on our next practice task. I mean, at least I hope so. I'm sorry about this presentation at all. Yeah, but so all you need to do, you need to go back to your repo and switch to yet another branch, which is called task-02-styles. And again, just open homepage Dart as your starting point. Guys, just can you hear me? Have you seen the presentation? Have you seen? Cool. Sorry about that. Okay, anyway, let me share my editor. In this case, I hope I won't mess it up this time. And again, I would like to conduct Yeah, right. Cool, guys. Can you see my editor for now? Cool, cool. So basically, this task is completely open-ended. So the purpose of this task is to simply give you a way to somehow to put your new knowledge into service, to utilize some of the styling widgets, especially take some widgets from built-in libraries for material or for Cupertino UI. And so basically, the only guidance I have for you here is just to be creative and try to express yourself as good as possible. There is no right or wrong solution for this. Taking into account our time box, I think I have to give you only, let's say, 5 minutes for this. So I hope you guys okay with that. And anyway, guys, are you ready to start? Just put the plus sign into chat and I will start my clock. Okay. Cool, cool. You're ready then. Let's keep going. All right. Yeah, guys, I know that this time box is not fair at all, but anyway, so how's it going? How do you feel about this task? Have you managed to do anything thrilling, anything exciting? Okay, cool. Okay, great. So basically, let me quickly jump to my uh, solution. So for sure, I've tried to include as many styling widgets as I only could. So first of all, let me just try to, can you guys see application running in emulator? Okay, cool. So as you can see here, now it looks a bit more appealing. So like I can add new words, and these words look like just some cards, and I can tap on these cards and I can see usage tracking gets updated. And let's try to take a look how have I accomplished that. So I've introduced a couple of more components for my layout and appearance. And as you can see here, everything is starting from the words list improvements. And the core thing here to take a look at is the new word grid component. And inside, this component is actually responsible for laying out list of words. And this component simply calls a grid view built-in widget inside Flutter, which allows you to lay out your children just as a grid with some given constraints, such as count for each axis, some gaps between axes, and things like that. Apart from that, I've created a custom component for card, which is called word card. And for this, I had to introduce. So basically, I have to compose a couple of widgets from built-in Flutter library. And so the first one is simply card, which is just like a regular material UI card, and a special thing called Inkwell. And you can think about Inkwell as about some reusable mechanism to add this material-like flavor push or tap press animation to any surface inside your application, which creates this so-called ripple effect or splash effect. And as you can see here, I've just composed them together. Card is not tappable by default, but Inkwell is tappable. And so by doing this composition, I managed to build some sort of custom tapeable card component. Yep, and this is basically it. I've done also a couple of separate components for some UI stuff. For instance, some special rounded button, which is just a material button with the border shaped as a circle, as you can see here, as well as outline text field, which is just a text field, just a regular text field, but it features this sort of outlined border, which is also kind of fancy effect, and this makes field more sort of noticeable, I should say. All right, cool. So at this point, guys, do you have any questions to discover right now or anything else? Are we ready to move on, or should we hold it for a moment? Okay, cool. I suppose we can simply move on. So the thing is that so at this point, we've managed to build some application which is capable of committing one particular task, which is word usage tracking, and we have even managed to build it, to make it sort of fancy, and it accomplishes business requirements successfully. However, I think that the time has come to introduce more complexity into it. And that is the reason why I would like you to introduce to more sophisticated version of basically the same application, where we are going to tackle more challenging problems of UI development from the angle of Flutter. And let me introduce this new version, which is Active Vocabulary version 2 with dictionaries for now. And the main difference here will be that our application is going to be separated into two parts. And the first part is called just a dictionary. And this particular dictionary is responsible for one thing, which is simply storing our words. As you can see here, we've got an input field. I hope you can see my presentation, right? Just let me know. Cool. I thought that everyone has disappeared from the chat. Never mind. Yeah, and this screen is responsible for adding new words to our list and simply displaying this list. Cool. However, now we are going to conduct our usage tracking itself on a completely different screen, which will be responsible only for displaying actually the list that we would like to practice for today. And taking into account all of these newly introduced complications, we have to come up with some list of topics, list of problems that we need to solve in order to achieve this kind of state. And these problems are actually routing, since we've introduced just now concept of multiple pages. And this basically means that we have to figure out the way how to organize navigation between them somehow. And on top of that, since we've introduced these separate pages, and we can clearly see that these pages are operating on some shared piece of data, which is actually a list of words. And that is the reason why we have to think about how we are going to manage our state between these separate pages. So here we go. Let's just move according to the list. And the first one is routing, actually. So the main idea regarding routing in Flutter is that all of the routing conducted via one particular object, which is called navigator. And here how it looks like. So basically, navigator API is pretty straightforward. It features several methods to conduct navigation. And as you can see here, this is an example of using a method called push. And as you can see, push simply accepts build context, which is needed, unfortunately, as well as simply widgets that we want to render instead of currently displaying one. We can for sure say that it's not simply a widget, it is some sort of widget wrapped into so-called route component. The reason why we have to do this wrapping is because these route components are usually responsible for performing some platform relevant animations, for instance, between route switches and things like that. So unfortunately, this is the way how we have to use this kind of API. However, as complexity of our application might grow, we might find it pretty uncomfortable for us to use this API where we have to directly be tied on the widgets themselves. Instead, we would like to use something different, something which looks more like these traditional web navigations we have when we have to create some sort of mapping between some string path and widgets that we want to render in some particular slot. And luckily, we have this flavor of API in Flutter as well. And so basically, this is it. And there is only one component which is responsible for this routing. It is your application root component, which is either Material app or Cupertino. Depends on your platform. And as you can see here, it accepts a new configuration property, which is called routes. And this routes is essentially just a map, which creates a mapping between these text identifiers as well as widgets that we would like to render as currently active one. It also accepts an initial route just to let Flutter know which widget should be rendered by default. Otherwise, he is going to take just the first one. And I have no idea how he is going to determine which one goes first, but never mind. Another important thing here to know is that although this naming convention is not obligatory, but it is present across Flutter community and Flutter projects. So even though you don't need to use that, it would be better if you will prefer using it instead in some cases, at least. Cool. So we have discovered how to set up this routing via our root widget, but now we need to find a way how to actually perform a navigation to these routes. And the thing is, Navigator features an API for that as well. And so here we've got a push named, which actually works almost the same, but it accepts a path, I mean, the road name that we've previously assigned, and it performs the same navigation, but in a bit more convenient way. An important consideration here regarding navigation with Navigator object is the following. The thing is that navigation works just exactly as a stack. And that is the idea that we have simply to keep in mind. And apart from being just a picture in our mind, it leads to one particular implication for us as developers. And this implication is that resources of previously rendered page won't be disposed, even though we might anticipate the quite opposite effect. So this is an important thing to take into account while you are working with Navigator methods. However, there is a workaround in case if you don't really want this behavior to occur and you really want previous page to be completely eliminated from the stack. Here is the answer for this. There is another method called push replacement, and you can use it either a simple push replacement or push replacement named if you want to use it with named navigation. And basically this will resolve all of your concerns regarding this stack-like behavior. Cool. And another use case that I would like to describe here with routing in Flutter is the following. It is happening often that we would like not simply to conduct some navigation, but we want to provide some arbitrary piece of data within this occasion of navigation. For instance, like here, we want to go to the page of some particular product. And just in order to let this product page component to let something know regarding which product we are trying to open right now, we have to provide some ID just to let this component to identify this product. And this is how we are going to do that. Basically, there is a special argument which is literally called arguments. And here we can place any arbitrary data we would like to pass forward along just to let this other component access it and consume for its own needs. And basically this looks like this. And now we need to discover how can we consume this data from the other side, from the product page component. And basically, this is it. It actually features some sort of casting and as well as this weird signature with model road of blah, blah, blah. It might be confusing at first, but this is the first example of actual and practical usage of context. And in most of the cases, when you see a signature like this, which says something.off and this method accepts context, it usually means that the thing is going to look up through the context and will try to find an instance of this particular widget, which is in this case, model road. And now with this idea in mind, the whole procedure of obtaining this raw data is pretty clear. So basically what we need to do, we need to go to the context and try to find the uppermost, not the uppermost, but the closest one model road instance. And from this instance, we are really able to get the data we want. It's actually the data we have passed previously by using this push named. And this is basically it. This is how we can add an opportunity for us to use some road parameters within our child widgets and other page widgets. And this is basically it with all of the required theory for routing task. And now I'm going to, as usual, ask you to switch to the new task branch, which is in this case task-03 routing. Just let me know when you will be able to do that. Just put a plus sign in the chat as usual. Maybe one more plus. Okay, cool. Never mind. And so, just as a reminder, what we need to accomplish at this stage. As I mentioned before, we decided to separate our application into two distinct pages. And the first one is supposed to be just a dictionary, which is responsible basically for displaying list of words and for managing it. So by saying managing, I mean simply adding new words and just browsing any existing ones. And completely different screen, which is called Words for Today, will be responsible for displaying words and adding an ability to track their usage. And this is the only problem you need to solve for now, just to separate your components into different pages and set up routing between them via some buttons or links, whatever. And for now, please don't care a lot about the state, which is supposed to be shared among these components, but we are going to discover this later. For now, you can just simply mock your data with some objects, lists, or whatever you like. So I think we are already out of time anyway, so probably I think I can just give you 10 minutes for this task, if you don't mind. Are you okay with this time box? Cool. Sounds good. Then I will talk to you guys back later. All right, guys, time is up as usual. So we've got 13 survivors here on board. I'm really proud of you guys. So how can you express your kind of feedback, your progress? Have you managed at least to implement the routing itself, just to set up the navigation? Silence in response. Okay. Never mind. Okay, so in this case, let me simply share my own solution for this problem. Well, so the setup of navigation was as simple as these examples that I shared on the slides. Basically, all I need to do is to provide proper configuration for my material app component. So here I have, oh, I hope you can see my editor now. No, you can't. Okay, let me reshare it. Can you see it for now? Cool. Anyway, we've done with the setup. So basically we set initial route, we set all of the routes of our application into corresponding routes records. So basically we have kind of index page for words for today, where we are going to practice with our words, as well as dictionary, which is responsible for our dictionary page. And the main thing here, or the main trouble that you might face during implementation of routing in Flutter, is that it is not exactly possible to define multiple so-called route slots. What I'm talking about is that it is highly likely that actually your application is going to share some similar components across different pages, such as navigation drawer, for instance, or application header and things like that. And the thing is that within the Flutter, during navigation implementation, we actually have to recreate every page on each occasion of navigation. And this is basically the main pain point that I've discovered. So in comparison with Angular, where we have router outlets, for instance, to accomplish the same thing, just to have some portion of our application remain the same, while re-render only some particular dynamic content inside of this similar portion. And unfortunately here, out of the box, this sort of navigation is not possible. And that was basically the reason why I had to introduce a particular separate component for drawer for my left navigation panel, which is called app drawer. And as you can see here, it is the same for all of the pages, and it handles and triggers all of the navigation. And as you can see here, it uses simple push replace named as I described on the slides. And now, apart from that, I've created a separate component for representing a page itself. So the main kind of layout component, which consists of the thing which is similar across all of the pages of our application. And as you can see here, I have dictionary page, which just consists of the same app drawer and some application bar with some custom title, which is relevant only for this page. And apart from that, I have a page for today's list for practice, which does basically the same. And they are all reusing the same app drawer component inside, just to at least accomplish some sort of reusability with this. And that was basically the main pain point in this component development. Yep, and basically this is it with all of the insights regarding this solution. I'm afraid we have to skip QA for this particular section, but I promise that next task will be much simpler and we will be able to accomplish it faster. And then I would like to propose to postpone all your questions further up until the last Q&A for today. I hope we will survive until this time. Okay, all right. Just send your plus signs if you're ready to move on. Okay, nice. Let me again share my presentation just in order not to mess up. Okay, cool. So we managed to resolve one particular problem of routing to separate our pages onto different components. And now we need to finally set up this shared portion of the state to allow different components from different parts of our widgets tree to interact with the same shared pieces of data. And before talking about any particular state management solution in Flutter ecosystem, it is impossible not to mention these two built-in widgets, which are called inherited widget and inherited model. And the main feature behind these widgets is that they allow you to actually share some data among multiple components within the same tree. This regards how deep they nested and whether they are siblings to each other or not. This regards any the relation of the disposition within the tree. You can think about it basically in the same way as about context in React, for instance, which serves basically the same purpose. And the only difference between inherited widget and inherited model is that inherited widget shares data as a whole. So like you can't share only some piece of data, but you need to share the whole model. At the same time, inherited model allows you to define your data as a combination of slices. And therefore, consumers of this data can subscribe to some particular slices of this data instead of subscribing to the whole piece. We are not going to discover them that deeply right now because it's not really essential. However, most of the modern popular state management solutions in Flutter are based heavily on top of these two widgets. That is the reason why I heavily encourage you to take a look at these links and discover these topics on your own. So next one, let me introduce basically one particular solution for state management, which is considered even by Flutter core team as a recommended approach. And this is a third-party package, which is called Provider. And now let's take a look how it looks like to manage your state with Provider package. So basically, you need to start with the definition of your storage, definition of the model of your application. And to do this, you should define yet another plain Dart class, which should extend a particular class from provider package, which is called change notifier. This class is not obliged by any contracts or any conventions in the way how you can implement it. It can be whatever you like, and it can hold state in any way you like. So it can hold it as a getters, as instance fields, and anything you can only imagine. The only interesting thing it features is the new method called notify listeners. And the thing is that notify listeners is our way as a model developers to notify all of our subscribers that our data has changed and you need to access me in order to grab the latest changes and use it. And this is basically our responsibility, not only to define this model, define its interface, but also to define that moment of time when we have to call notify listeners in order to propagate our listeners to all of our changes to all of the listeners. From that point, we need to find a way how to actually expose this model instance to our widget tree, because currently they're existing in some sort of different dimensions. We need to build some sort of bridge in order to connect them. And here is the answer. So provider package features multiple built-in widgets, which are actually built in purpose of providing some value, some arbitrary value to your widget tree. And you might refer to the documentation and see that there are a lot of providers for a lot of different types of data, such as futures, plain values, change notifiers, and things like that. And since here, for this exact case, we have to provide change notify instance to our tree, just literally plug it in, we have to use a special class called change notifier provider. I mean, special widget. This widget features pretty simple API. It simply accepts child, which is just a widget tree, which is going to act as a consumer of your shared state, of your data, which is exposed by your change notifier, and the create function, which is responsible for instantiating of your change notifier. And as you can see here, it is as simple as just calling a constructor function of your change notifier class. And this is not it with the exposure of this value. For now, we need to find a way how to actually subscribe to this instance, just literally get it and grab some value out of it and render it within our widget tree. And here we've got yet another widget for this, which is called consumer. And basically what it does, it is just going to, again, grab a context, and it is going to find the closest available provider, and it is going to inject this instance into our builder function, just as a change notifier instance. As you can see here, at this point here inside the build method, where we are supposed to build our widget tree, we have a full access to our user model that we defined previously. Here we've got a string name field, which we can access now. And now we can basically use this as a part of our widget tree, output our greetings, and moreover, for each occasion of change of the data within this model, we will be notified, and this build method will be called again. Therefore, this widget will be rendered just to reflect all of the latest changes within the state, among the state and widget tree. Moreover, it happens sometimes that we want not only to put some kind of state mutation business logic inside our model, but also we would like to put some side effect, which literally does nothing with our state, nothing which mutates it, but I don't know, like for this example, it simply prints the name value to the console. And in this case, the big question is, how can I use my model in this case if I want to simply grab some method and simply call it just for my utility purposes? And here we've got an API for this as well. We don't need to use any widget for this, since we don't need actually to build any widgets out of this information. We simply need to use this provider auth. And as I mentioned before, usually when you see a signature like this, when you have something.auth and it accepts context, it usually means looking up the widgets tree by using context and grabbing an instance of some widget. And in this case, we are going to grab this change notifier as defined in this generic argument of provider. And at this point, we are freely able to use whatever API we like out of this instance. It is crucial, it is important to notice here that we have to provide a special argument called listen and set it to false in order to use this method properly. What is the thing here? The thing is that in this case, our widget tree won't be rebuilt on each occasion of state change. And this is actually the behavior we want to achieve, because in this case, in this particular case, there is no strict dependency between the data which is kept within the shared state, within this user model, and the widget tree which gets out from this store page widget. And that is the reason why we should not listen for any notification updates. We simply want to log our username and completely forget about it. And that is all with the description of this specific use case. And if you think that this flavor of state management is not exactly your thing, you can feel free to explore other available solutions for state management in Flutter ecosystem. As you can see here on this list, there are several solutions which have already captured enough of stars within the web frontend community, such as MobX or Redux, which you can actually put into use inside Flutter as well, just by using the similar abstractions. And besides all of that, you can also try something completely new, like this block library, which is listed last in this list. And this is basically it with all of the theory regarding state management, an introduction for state management. And it is time to complete our final task for today. As usual, let's check out to our work branch, which is in this case task-04-state-management. And it will consist of actually 3 steps. Basically the same steps that I've declared during this presentation. At first, you will have to define the shape of your data via defining your change notifiers. Then you will have to plug them in. Let me just share my code to demonstrate it. So you will find a ready-made boilerplate inside this branch. Let me quickly switch over to it. Are you seeing my presentation now? Are you seeing my IDE? Cool, cool. Okay, so the state management, what about boilerplate? So open up the main component, main Dart file, I mean, and here you can see that I've prepared a special entry point where you will be able to integrate all of your providers. And basically all you need to do when you will reach the step of plugging in your change notifiers into your widgets tree, you will have to replace this child with the corresponding change notifier provider with the proper signature, like with the child and with create method in order to instantiate your change notifier. And then you will have to go through all of your components which are consuming some data. For instance, we are talking about dictionary component. And instead of using some mocked data, which lives just inside this component, you will have to use this consumer widget in order to consume words from our shared state, from our provider, essentially. And this is basically it with the last task, last and final one, I promise. And how do you guys think, how much time do you need for that? Does it make sense at this point what should be accomplished? Okay. Yeah, Maxim, it happens. It happens. Sorry about that. Anyway, I'm starting up my timer for, let's say, for 7 minutes. Yep. And I will talk to you guys back later. Sorry guys, but this is it with our time. As usual, classical question, how's it going? Have you managed to go so far to reach some nice milestone in doing this? Yeah, Maxim, I know that you are tired. You are all tired. Okay. Anyway, as usual, feel free to share any questions or feedback, but let me jump into basically my solution, which is in my opinion the most boring thing in this particular workshop. By the way, can you see my VS Code? Cool, nice. Okay, so basically I did nothing apart from the things that I mentioned in our presentation. So first of all, I have defined my provider for shared data, which is simply words provider, which simply holds a list of words to display and to track their usage. And as you can see here, it features exactly two methods to mutate the state. And one of them is to simply add new word to the list, and as well yet another method for tracking its usage. And as you can see, both of them are obliged to call notify listeners just to make these changes propagating to the widgets tree. And apart from that, I have a simple getter just for performing a retrieval of words in this case. And this is basically it with the my data shape definition. So integration went just according to the plan. I've simply defined some provider, and the only tricky thing here that I have never presented to you before is this multi-provider. So basically the thing is that it is common for any complex application to have multiple providers. And so basically this is just a convenient way for you to define them. So basically all you have to do is to wrap your application into this multi-provider, and as the same, it accepts child as a child nodes, widget tree, and simply provider array, which is basically an array of all of your providers, of all of the values that you would like to expose to your widget tree. And this is basically it, but you could easily done it even without multi-provider. In fact, we don't even need it here since we've got only one provider, which is as simple as change notifier. And now let's take a look at the consumer usage. So basically, here is the dictionary. And as you can see here, it actually does everything as it should. So it takes a model instance, which is in our case, our change notifier that we've injected previously, and calls it getWords method, which actually just return an actual list of words. And this is it. This is basically an example of connection between a shared state implemented with provider and some widget by consumer. And here, as you can see, the last portion of this connection is actually just grabbing this change notifier listener and calling this API, which is in our case add new word, just in order to perform addition of new word to our shared state. And this is basically it. We are ready to wrap up with this topic. And let me again switch to my presentation. Can you guys see it? Cool. Okay, let's keep going up to the end core of our workshop, basically. And At this point, let's just stop for a moment and make a quick recap of all of the things that we've gathered for today. And I believe all of you are completely overwhelmed by the new information and new concepts. But anyway, for now, let's put all of our efforts into structuring it as strict as only possible. So we've started our introduction to Flutter with getting to know what widgets are, which is the same as components. Basically, how to make our composable UI, how to create different kinds of components such as stateless widgets or stateful ones, how to compose them with each other, and how to set up any sort of interaction between them. Next, we move to styling, just in order to find some solution to make them look fancier, to change their appearance in the way we like, and things like that. Then we introduced some more complicated logic into our application by separating our pages separating our widgets, in different pages. And then we had to organize the routing between them. And we finished that off with solution for the state management problem, just to allow these distinct pages to operate on some shared piece of data. But this is only if we take a look from the perspective of sort of technical features that we've covered. But what can we actually tell about ourselves as the developers after this activity? So I think it is undoubtable that, or at least sort of undoubtable, that now we are capable of building at least some super simple Flutter applications. However, besides that, under some circumstances, we are also able to handle user input in our Flutter applications. We are able to compose our application as just a conjunction of different screens, and we can also set up navigation between screens for our user. And on top of that, we can even fine-tune their appearance to make them look the way how we need or how we like. And it can be finished off with implementation of some more or less complex business logic powered by our solution for shared state management, because it is often required to build some complicated logic on top of it. And from this point, I would like to give you some guidance regarding where can we go next from this position in order to find out more about Flutter, in order to strengthen our knowledge regarding its current concepts. And please feel free to use these, I think, pretty much comprehensive list of references for your further guidance. It is mostly all of these articles were used as a source for this workshop, basically. There are several articles which we have not managed to cover today, unfortunately, and they are mostly dedicated to responsive layouts and so-called constraints. So this topic has been left completely untouched, so feel free to research it on your own pace. And besides that, there is a good online book which I can probably recommend, which is Flutter in Action, which I used as well as a preparation material. And besides all of that, besides taking into account all of the things that we've discovered already, we can take some sort of a sneak peek into the things that still unknown for us and which are still yet to discover for us. And this thing includes the things like data persistence, since for now we have no idea how to do this in Flutter, and our app always starts with the completely empty dictionary, just because we have not yet introduced any sort of persistent storage into our application. This thing will actually lead us to research something about future, which is actually a simple data structure that we are going to discover, which represents just the core unit of any asynchronous activity in Dart as a language. We will work with this as well. In order to handle all of this new complexity as well as asynchronous activity, we will have to find some other way to bundle our application together and some other way to separate our logic, like business one, infrastructure one from presentational one, which lies on the shoulders of widgets. And this problem will be solved by our take to dependency injection in Flutter. And then we are going to move to a little bit of reactivity in Flutter, which is powered by yet another Dart-specific data structure, which is called stream. It is supposed to be fun. And basically, this is it with the today's workshop. Let me check the number of survivors. 12. Okay. Anyway, I'm proud of you guys. That's the only thing I can say. I believe that, as I've said before, you're supposed to be overwhelmed by all of this information and concepts and all of these strict timelines. But anyway, the thing I would like to emphasize is that you've got all of the materials from this point. You've got the repo, you've got all of the code, reference, and things like that. And even though that you have not managed to discover a lot of things or touch a lot of things today, now you are free to explore Flutter on your own, at your own pace, by using the tools you like, since I've provided literally everything to you. But anyway, as usual, I'm open to any questions to be answered right now. And for sure, feel free, please, to post first and foremost all of your feedback regarding this event, because and this feedback, I encourage you to post it as honest as possible, because otherwise we won't be able to make it less painful next time. And I believe you don't want it to be that level of pain. Cool. And what else? What I wanted to say? Yeah, keep post your questions inside Telegram channel, just to let me address all of your concerns offline. I will try to do my best in order to do this, especially taking into account that there are only 12 of us remain. There should be not so many questions, I suppose. So anyway, I'm giving you just 1 minute for your questions right now, just an exclusive 1 minute. Do you have any? Okay, no, you don't. At least it looks as if you don't. Okay, cool. Then the only thing I have to say is just to say thank you for staying tuned. Thank you for bearing it. Thank you for getting through it. And thank you just for being part of it together with me. Yeah, and I wish you... Oh, wow, next Thursday. Cool. I wish you all of the great on your journey to learn Flutter. I hope that will be an exciting and thrilling journey for you. And as usual, stay safe and take care, guys. Thanks, everyone, and bye-bye.